Once upon a time, there was a little girl who loved to wear a red hooded cloak. Her name was Little Red Riding Hood, and she lived with her mother in a cottage near the forest. One day, her mother asked her to take a basket of goodies to her grandmother, who was sick in bed at her house in the woods. "Be careful, my dear," her mother said. "Don't stray from the path, and don't talk to strangers. The forest is full of dangers, especially the big bad wolf. He is cunning and greedy, and he will try to trick you and eat you." Little Red Riding Hood promised to obey her mother and set off with the basket. She walked along the path, humming a tune and admiring the flowers and the birds. She was so happy that she didn't notice a pair of yellow eyes watching her from behind a tree. It was a big bad wolf, and he had smelled the delicious food in the basket. "Hello, little girl," he said, stepping out of the shadows. "Where are you going on this fine day?" Little Red Riding Hood was startled, but she remembered her mother's words and tried to be polite. "I'm going to visit my grandmother, who lives in a house behind those trees," she said, pointing to the distance. "What a nice granddaughter you are," the wolf said, licking his lips. "And what a lovely cloak you have. It suits you very well." "Thank you, sir," Little Red Riding Hood said, blushing. "What do you have in your basket?" the wolf asked, pretending to be curious. "Some cake and wine for my grandmother. She is ill and weak, and they will make her feel better," Little Red Riding Hood said. "How thoughtful of you," the wolf said, thinking of how he could get the food and the girl. "But you know, your grandmother would also appreciate some fresh flowers. Why don't you pick some along the way? They are so pretty and fragrant, and they will brighten up her room." Little Red Riding Hood thought that was a good idea. She loved flowers, and she wanted to please her grandmother. "Maybe I will," she said. "Of course, you will," the wolf said, smiling wickedly. "But don't go too far, or you might get lost. I'll wait for you here and keep an eye on your basket." Little Red Riding Hood agreed and left the basket with the wolf. She ran into the woods, looking for the prettiest flowers she could find. She picked a bunch of daisies, then some roses, then some violets, then some lilies. She was so busy that she didn't notice how far she had gone or how much time had passed. Meanwhile, the wolf took the basket and ran to the grandmother's house. He knocked on the door and put on a high-pitched voice, "Grandmother, it's me, Little Red Riding Hood. I've brought you some cake and wine." "Come in, my dear," the grandmother said, who was hard of hearing. "The door is unlocked." The wolf opened the door and entered the house. He saw the grandmother lying in bed, wearing a nightcap. He jumped on her and gobbled her up in one bite. Then he put on her clothes and her nightcap and got into her bed. He waited for Little Red Riding Hood to arrive. After a while, Little Red Riding Hood came back to the path. She had a big bouquet of flowers in her arms, and she was feeling tired. She saw the wolf waiting for her, holding the basket. "Thank you for watching my basket, sir," she said. "You're welcome, little girl," the wolf said. "Now hurry up and go to your grandmother's house. She must be waiting for you." Little Red Riding Hood nodded and took the basket. She walked to the house and knocked on the door. "Grandmother, it's me, Little Red Riding Hood. I've brought you some cake and wine and some flowers." "Come in, my dear," the wolf said, imitating the grandmother's voice. "The door is unlocked." Little Red Riding Hood opened the door and entered the house. She saw the grandmother lying in bed, wearing a nightcap. She approached the bed and put the basket and the flowers on a table. "Hello, grandmother," she said. "How are you feeling today?" "I'm feeling much better. Thank you, my dear," the wolf said. Little Red Riding Hood looked at her grandmother and noticed something strange. She said, "Grandmother, what big ears you have." "The better to hear you with, my dear," the wolf said. "Grandmother, what big eyes you have." "The better to see you with, my dear," the wolf said. "Grandmother, what big hands you have." "The better to hug you with, my dear," the wolf said. "Grandmother, what big teeth you have." "The better to eat you with, my dear," the wolf said, and he sprang out of the bed and lunged at Little Red Riding Hood. Little Red Riding Hood screamed and ran away from the wolf. She ran around the house, looking for a way to escape. She saw a window and opened it. She jumped out of the window and landed on the ground. She got up and ran to the forest, hoping to find someone to help her. The wolf chased after her, but he was too fat and slow. He couldn't catch up with her, and he soon lost sight of her. He was angry and frustrated, and he decided to go back to the house and wait for her to return. Little Red Riding Hood ran as fast as she could, until she met a woodcutter who was working in the forest. He saw her red cloak and recognized her. He said, "Little Red Riding Hood, what are you doing here? Where is your basket?" Little Red Riding Hood told him everything that had happened. She said, "The big bad wolf ate my grandmother, and he tried to eat me too. He is wearing her clothes and her nightcap, and he is lying in her bed. Please help me." The woodcutter was shocked and angry. He said, "Don't worry, little girl. I'll help you. Come with me, and we'll teach that wolf a lesson." He took his axe and followed Little Red Riding Hood to the house. He saw the wolf sleeping in the bed, snoring loudly. He crept up to the bed and raised his axe. He was about to strike the wolf when he had an idea. He said, "Wait, Little Red Riding Hood. Maybe we can save your grandmother. Maybe the wolf hasn't digested her yet. Let's cut open his belly and see." Little Red Riding Hood agreed, and they cut open the wolf's belly with the axe. To their surprise and joy, they found the grandmother alive and well. She had been swallowed whole by the wolf, and she had not been harmed. They helped her out of the wolf's belly and hugged her. The grandmother said, "Thank you, Little Red Riding Hood. Thank you, Woodcutter. You have saved my life. How can I ever repay you?" The woodcutter said, "Don't worry about that, grandmother. We're just glad you're safe, but we have to deal with this wolf. He can't get away with what he did." They decided to fill the wolf's belly with stones and sew it back up. They did so, and the wolf didn't wake up. He was still sleeping, unaware of what had happened. Then they hid behind the curtain and waited for the wolf to wake up. After a while, the wolf woke up. He felt a heavy weight in his stomach, and he was very thirsty. He got out of the bed and walked to the door. He saw a well outside, and he decided to drink some water. He went to the well and leaned over to drink, but the stones in his belly were so heavy that they dragged him down. He fell into the well and drowned. He was dead, and he would never harm anyone again. Little Red Riding Hood, her grandmother, and the woodcutter heard a splash, and they came out of the house. They saw the wolf's body floating in the well, and they cheered. They had defeated the wolf, and they were safe. They thanked the woodcutter again, and invited him to join them for a meal. They ate the cake and the wine, and they celebrated their victory. They were happy and grateful, and they vowed to never forget each other. Little Red Riding Hood learned a valuable lesson that day. She learned to be careful and obedient, and to never talk to strangers. She also learned to be brave and resourceful, and to never give up hope. She grew up to be a wise and kind woman, and she always wore her red hooded cloak. And they all lived happily ever after.